Hey ladies, my name is Jenny Chaffetz and I am the host of SIDELINE Sisters. Are you a busy mom, powerhouse professional, or high-achieving go-getter? This show is for no BS women who want to be inspired to get off the sidelines of their lives. Ever feel like you're playing small or safe or just on autopilot? My guests are relatable women who've gone on a journey, overcome challenges, and lived to share the lessons that we want to hear. These conversations will be funny, sad, scary, wise, encouraging, and most of all, real. So whether you're driving, doing chores, exercising, walking the dog, or just laying on the couch, settle in and enjoy. I want to invite you to take back your power, reignite your passions, and step off the sidelines. Let's go. Hey everybody, so glad to have you here for another episode of SIDELINE Sisters. My name is Jenny Chaffetz and I'm the host of this show. And I want to say how grateful I am that you tune in every week. And if you're sharing the episodes or telling your friends about them, bravo, and I so appreciate you. Today I am excited to share my conversation with my friend Lorraine. I met Lorraine at a beautiful retreat that we attended back in the spring. And when I met her, I was immediately impressed by her resume, her demeanor, and her mission. You know, a lot of people use the expression of turning pain into purpose. Well, Lorraine totally embodies that. And if you are the parent of a differently abled, neurodiverse, autistic, or otherwise challenged child, then sit back, get comfortable, and feel so seen by this conversation. Lorraine Hightower is a certified dyslexia advocate and founder of a leading educational advocacy practice in Northern Virginia. Combining professional expertise with her personal journey as a parent, she transforms the lives of children with dyslexia by creating personalized educational plans that help them learn and thrive. Her advocacy has shaped state policy, securing mandated teacher training on dyslexia in Virginia, and earned her the Child Advocate of the Year award from the Virginia State PTA. Recently, she received the Cypress Leadership Award from the Siena School for her instrumental work in securing vital support for children with dyslexia. Featured in Dystinct magazine and a frequent guest on national podcasts, Lorraine and her team provide hands-on advocacy, parent training, and consultation for families nationwide. She holds a certificate in special education advocacy from William and Mary Law School, is a trained mediator, has been a state leader for Decoding Dyslexia Virginia, a past board member of the Virginia International Dyslexia Association, and is a professional member of the Council of Parent Attorneys and Advocates. Lorraine is a fierce advocate for individuals with dyslexia as she relentlessly champions structured literacy interventions, effective accommodations, and the opportunities every child needs to succeed in school and in life. And even if your child is not dyslexic, you will find this conversation valuable. As a parent of a neurodiverse individual, I learned from Lorraine, and if I could turn back time, there are things I probably would do differently. However, as Lorraine impressed upon me over and over again, we parents only know what we know, and as a result, do what we think is best for our children. So we all need to give ourselves some grace and not reprimand and punish ourselves for decisions we made with limited information. When we know better, we do better, and we can always start that in the present moment. Now, before I get into the conversation with Lorraine, I want to remind you, or maybe tell you for the first time if you're just hearing it, Gentle Coaching is pivoting. I love coaching and breath work, but I'm going to be incorporating those skills in a new mission. I want to educate and empower women to look and feel better than they ever have through the power of plants and a vegan lifestyle. There is a lot of information on the internet about plant-based diets. And yes, food is a foundational component to a vegan lifestyle, but it's not the only component. And I also want to clarify here that this is not a political decision. I am not talking about activism or policy, although if that's your thing, great. What I'm really doing is coming at the vegan lifestyle, the plant-based lifestyle, from a place of compassion. I used to be addicted to animal protein. Every meal I ate had at least one animal product, if not more. A normal breakfast for me was English muffin with eggs, Canadian bacon, and cheese. So I understand how extreme veganism sounds. And also, I am a changed person from who I was 5 years ago. And as I mentioned with respect to Lorraine, when we talk about giving ourselves grace as parents, the grace is exponentially greater now that I'm vegan. My perspective about the planet, the animals, the people who work in factory farming, all of that has expanded my compassion and respect for things outside of myself. And also, I have become so much more loving and understanding toward myself, which I never experienced when I was eating the standard American diet and dieting, restricting, counting, weighing, measuring, getting on the scale, berating myself for how I looked, and feeling really crappy, because let's not forget the gut issues, the endometriosis, the sinus infections that led to me having surgery, the aches and pains, the inflammation and bloating. None of that was enjoyable, but I just thought it was part of life. Now I know otherwise, and I want to share that with all of you. I want to inspire you to take care of yourselves in a loving, gentle way. So that's what I'm offering at Gentle Coaching, vegan lifestyle coaching that incorporates nutrition, exercise, sleep, stress, toxins, healing modalities, and baby steps. So I invite you to check out gentlecoaching.com/veganism and consider working with me to try this new approach to living. And I promise you, it's not boring, it's not restrictive, it's way more nutritious than when I was just eating animal protein for most of my meals. It's a beautiful approach to living, and I want to share it with you. Now let's get into this really special conversation with Lorraine Hightower. I am so excited to be in the presence of Lorraine Hightower, who I met in person at a women's event back in the spring. So Lorraine, it is so nice to see your beautiful face again.
It's great to see you, Jenny.
It's fun when all my conversations are fun, whether I'm meeting a stranger for the first time or reconnecting with someone. And so it's really nice to be able to see you again and get your energy in this space. So I'm grateful to have you here.
Thank you. And I know when we met, I think we met in Florida, I was very much drawn to your energy. And I just so love and admire what you do and love that you have a podcast that does offer the opportunity for women as Sideline Sisters to get very real and authentic and learn from each other. I think it's beautiful. So thank you.
Yay. Yay. Oh, well, I'm so glad you're here to share your wisdom because you are someone that I deeply admire, and the work that you're doing in the world is just so important. So I'm glad that we're going to showcase it today.
Oh, thank you.
So here we are. It's that time of year again. It is the start of a new school year. So I'm really excited to get into a conversation that I have yet to have on this show, which is that about education, children's academic needs, what they're presenting in school, at home, and what that does to us as moms, moms of students, moms of students with needs. So I'm really glad that you can speak to that. So as we get started, I would love to just give you some space to introduce the audience to your story. And I read your bio. They know the title that you hold and the work that you're doing. But what was the story behind the mission work that you're doing now? And maybe you'll just infuse this naturally, but how you got into this work, your family's personal story, and also how you were able to know something needed addressing.
Well, I will say the moms, not to leave the dads out of it, but the moms always know, Jenny. It's
Yeah.
a process of really realizing that that something has to change, right? But my story really begins with my son, who's turning 21 soon, and his journey into the public education system. He was an only child. He was a cherished child. My husband and I were married 10 years before we had him. And I say that because I was reading to him in the womb. I was reading to him outside of the womb. We were doing all the things, right? I was painting in the morning for fine motor skills, and just really, he had everything he needed for a strong foundation into the public school system. But at a parent teacher conference in first grade, a teacher who had 30 years of experience is like, hey, your son is really fidgety. He's not sitting still. We're not sure, if he has ADHD. And, my husband and I are like, well, what first grade boy is not fidgety? So we really didn't do
Fair.
anything at the time, right?
Yep.
We're like,
Yep.
that seems kind of normal. And then in second grade, his teacher, who had 30 years of experience, also said, hey, your son Jonathan is one of the brightest kids in this classroom, but he is really struggling to read, to write. He can't really write his name. And we think, he might have a learning difference. And I was actually really grateful that that teacher took the risk of telling me that. But what I didn't, oh, yeah, do you have a question?
Yeah, no, I was just going to interrupt you for 1 second.
Yeah, of
I
course.
apologize. When I was a teacher, which I mentioned to you was
Yep.
25 to 20 years ago, for those 5 years, I was told I couldn't say things like that. I
Oh, I
didn't
believe you.
have
And
the
yes.
liberty to suggest your child might have X, Y, and Z deficiency or need. It was not within my purview. And that was a really challenging place to sit.
Right. And just to speak to that briefly, and then I'll continue with the story. Unfortunately, I think that that dilemma still exists for public school teachers, even though they are mandatory reporters when it comes to
Right.
child abuse or some
Yes.
other, concerning
Oh
issues that
yeah, I got
right.
myself in
Yes,
those
right.
situations, but yet I wasn't allowed to say to a parent at a conference, you might want to consider some neuropsych evaluation or
Okay.
some additional kind of testing because what I'm seeing is not consistent with the other students.
Right, but what I want to clarify is that teachers actually can refer for
Mm,
an evaluation if they do
okay.
suspect a disability. So,
Okay.
to your point, they're scared to do so. There's often conversations that happen outside of the classroom, right? Where they don't feel comfortable, as you're saying, to talk to parents. But in this case, my son's second grade teacher, she had a special education background and she was teaching general education. And she saw as she told me how bright and capable he was because my son one day, Jenny, said that he was the runt of the classroom. And while we all
Oh.
reassured him that he was the same size, as everybody else, and why was he saying he was the runt of the classroom? He said, you don't get it, Mom. I'm the mental runt of the class.
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna cry.
I know, but then his
Wow.
teacher, beautiful Miss Alexander, said to me, she's like, Lorraine, don't you see though that he's the only one that would explain it to you that way. That's what I'm trying to tell you. He's very bright and
Yeah.
capable, but he can't read, write, and spell. So long story short, we were grateful that Miss Alexander shared that with us, but what I was not expecting was the challenge of just getting my son evaluated through the public school district.
Yeah.
And I will never forget that meeting where we went with his teachers, with the counselors, the administration, and we're looking at all the data to determine if my son needs a special education evaluation. And what I thought was going to be a very quick meeting was like an hour and a half discussion where my husband and I are literally begging the school district, like, why wouldn't you want to do this evaluation? And, that led to us getting private evaluations, psychoeducational
Yes.
evaluations, then going back to the school district, them finally agreeing that they're going to double check. And now they are evaluating our son. And it all led to an eligibility meeting where after, a year of going through this process, because the special education process is lengthy,
Yes.
um, the team ultimately told us, we're not really worried about your son. He's bright, he's verbal, he's a good kid, he's not a behavior problem. And the defining moment for me, Jenny, and I still get choked up when I honestly think about it because it was so hard to hear. His guidance counselor pointed her finger across the table at me and said, Mrs. Hightower, if you put, I think she actually said, if you slap a special education label on your son, you are going to change his life forever. And I sat there with the tears like welling up in my eyes and I said, you know what? If I don't put a special education label on my son, you're right. Like I'm totally going to change his life forever. And what kind of life is my son actually going to have if he cannot read, write, and spell?
Yeah.
And that was the hard truth. So even though we knew like I said, like we knew something was not right with our son. We still knew he
Yeah.
was bright and capable. So we did more, my son jokes with me later, Mom, you treated me like a lab rat, because that was actually a popular TV show at the time. And
Oh,
he
funny.
really was. He was going through summer tutoring. He
Yeah.
was going through all these evaluations. We finally got diagnosis that confirmed severe dyslexia, ADHD, dysgraphia, which is a handwriting disability. And I thought, okay, now that we have all of this, right now he's about in fourth grade. The school district is going to hear us and they're
Yep.
going to do the right thing. They're going to give him an individualized education program. We're going to
Sure.
get accommodations and services, and all's going to be well.
Hmm.
Because keep in mind, as a recovering overperformer, type A corporate sales and marketing executive, I was highly engaged in his elementary school. And I was serving at the time as president
Yes.
of the Parent Teacher Association. And I helped the school win a national award for effective family school partnerships.
Wow.
So that's the context by which I enter this eligibility meeting. And I don't say that because I was expecting a special favor. I just say that I thought we were going to give an honest look at the data and we're going to
Right.
make an informed decision. And what actually happened is they were like, yeah, no, we think you're basically overreacting. He's going to be perfectly fine. Look at his fluid reasoning. He's got a lot to work with cognitively. And they pretty much showed us the door. And after that, Jenny, I told parents I felt like I walked around with a scarlet D for dyslexia on my chest,
Mhm.
because whenever I would mention my son was diagnosed with dyslexia, teachers would walk away from me, they would shut it down. The principal that I had worked so closely with to establish this national effective parent school partnership, she didn't want to talk about it. And I will give her credit and say a couple years later, she took me aside and confidentially said, Lorraine, part of the problem is it's not that we didn't want to help you. We didn't have any teachers trained in the type of
Okay.
methodology that you were asking for to work with dyslexic individuals. So again, that's about fourth grade. And then we get through fifth grade, and he still, I think he finally does, because at this point we got attorneys involved and what have you. He
Yep.
finally has an IEP
Yep.
in fifth grade. But the hard truth is, when he went to middle school, he felt like a social freak and he couldn't do what everyone else could do. Despite being in an honors histories class, he was still working with special education teachers in a very small classroom, and there was that social stigma around it. And people were saying to him, are you retarded? What's your
Oh,
problem? All the things that kids
yeah. Yeah.
say. And my son became pre-suicidal in sixth
Oh,
grade.
jeez.
And so we were faced with the reality that if we did not, according to a local psychologist, if we did not pull him out of the public school system, we might not actually have to worry about his future, right?
Right.
So we placed him in a private school that was an hour and a half away, and my husband
Hmm.
and I drove 90 minutes on the road minimum, literally
Yep.
just to keep our son alive. And the whole time that that was happening, I became a woman on fire, is all I'm going to say, because I
Yeah.
could not believe the injustice of what was happening, not just to kids who learn differently, to the parents who were trying to advocate for them, but also to our teachers who were so well intentioned and wanted to do the right thing and hadn't been given the training that they needed to help these kids. 2 to 4 in every classroom, right, have dyslexia. We know this from national research, affects up to 20% of the population. So from this whole lived experience, and yeah, I will say the good news is my son self-selected himself back to high school, public high school, because he said the pool of girls was very small in the private school. It's like, I need a bigger pond, Mom. There's not a lot of girls.
Right.
So,
Oh, that's
he
so
did
cute.
find his own way. He found his own voice and he made it back to public high school. But years of talking to pediatricians, school board members, legislators. I did a presentation, the Virginia Department of Education sent me to Quantico to talk to their
Wow.
military personnel, because they have these DoD schools and things like that. Because literacy is a national crisis, and not just for individuals with dyslexia. It's more of it's a life or death matter, I think, for kids who have dyslexia. But it's something not really talked about in our mainstream culture. We just kind of decide these kids will be fine and they can use AI, or they can
Yeah.
use, their all of their devices. But again, it's a passion of mine, and I have came to be known as someone who took her, pain as a parent and put it into a professional mission. And my desire really was to prevent any other family from going through what we went through, and to hopefully save any child who felt pre-suicidal based on their lived school experience.
Sorry for the interruption, but I have to tell you once again how excited I am to now be offering vegan lifestyle coaching. Now, I know the word vegan can be triggering, so just hear me out. Do you want to get healthier? Do you want to feel better? Are you maybe dealing with some health stuff, body stuff that just isn't ideal? We all are, aren't we? So what if I could offer you a way to improve your body? The bloating, the inflammation, brain fog, aches and pains, digestive issues, poor sleep, extra weight, mood, and energy. Wouldn't that be awesome? Yeah, I thought so. Now head to gentlecoaching.com/veganism and let's get started. You want to feel better and I want to help you get there. Now let's get back to the show. Thank you so much for sharing that. And as a parent of a neurodiverse child, I am in awe of how you accepted the challenge, because I think a lot of us, speaking for myself, speaking for other parents that I know, could go the other way in the sense of it buries us. Like you said, the amount of time that the process takes, the paperwork, the outside resources that you need to compile, waiting for various tests to take place. It's so consuming that, not that I ignored anything, but I certainly wasn't going to make it now my mission to do more of this because it was such a burden. I had nothing left. I couldn't imagine taking on this course for other people. So it's just so commendable that you've done that.
I was just going to say, Jenny, I don't want to sugarcoat this in any way. I mean, this was over 15 years ago, and I did go on a personal journey. And
and I don't mean to suggest that you didn't feel
oh,
buried.
no.
And
But
yeah,
yeah, I totally get what you're saying. Many parents are like, yeah, no, thank you. And many just are like, exit the school system and do homeschool and what have you.
yeah,
But what I like to say is, I felt like I went through the 5 stages of grief, right? That we often hear referenced. I was
yeah.
definitely in the shock and denial, and that took a while to work
Mm-hmm.
through. Then there was the anger, where I remember complaining with parents in the parking lot and going to
Yep,
board meetings and saying, I'm going to speak out about this. And
yep.
then I had the epiphany of, do I want to be part of the problem or part of the solution, right?
Mhm.
And then I started bargaining, as I said, talking to all these people, going to the top in my local school district, working with legislators to draft legislation. And and even though I'm doing all this, there were moments of depression. Like, there were moments of, I'm not a anxious person or a depressed person by nature, but there were moments where, I just slept all weekend. I might have had 2 glasses of wine one night. I might have binge watched Netflix because I was really tired of the fight, is what it felt
Yeah,
like. But then there is that acceptance. There is that connection with others. You are making meaningful progress. I helped write and pass, 3 state laws to benefit kids with dyslexia and teachers who need to be trained on the science of reading. And the group of parents that I worked with through Decoding Dyslexia Virginia, they went on even beyond my involvement to pass over, 15 state laws. And I always say, anytime something happens to you, personal tragedy, family tragedy, career upset, what have you, we all go through these 5 stages of grief, right? In our own way. Some get stuck, some move through
yeah.
it quickly. But to me, the 6th stage, Jenny, is advocacy. It
Mm,
really is, because in our own way, from our own lived experience, if we make it through that 5th stage after the depression, and I'm just speaking from my own experience, but I've seen this in others, you want to help
yeah,
people prevent this from happening to themselves, because that's what heals your soul. If you
yeah.
can help other people not go down that path, you start healing your heart piece by piece. And honestly, that's what it did for me. I volunteered as an educational advocate for families for years. And
Mm,
then, I started to get a little like local name for myself, and I was in the paper and what have you, and I started a business. But I did that work for other people on a volunteer basis because, not, of course, I wanted to serve and help their child.
yeah.
But what I didn't expect was it was healing me. It was healing me to
Mm,
help them.
mm. Here's a funny story for you. So I was listening, or maybe not funny. I actually think it's frightening. I was listening to a podcast the other day. I'm not going to out it too much because I don't, they meant well. It was talking about neurodivergence.
Mm-hmm.
And the host of the podcast was interviewing an expert in the field. And the host said, "Tell me more about what this is. I don't think I know anyone who's neurodivergent." She went on to explain, she was talking specifically about young
Mm-hmm.
children or school age children. And so she was talking about ADHD and
Mm-hmm.
autism and challenges with regulating the body and concentration, rigidity,
Mm-hmm.
rumination. And he continued by saying, the host, "I don't think I know these people. So tell me, what is the worldwide crisis or the national crisis in this field?" And I'm yelling at the podcast saying, "Are you bleeping kidding me? Like,
Right.
I feel like I know more
Mm-hmm.
neurodiverse kids than not, or adults too." And so it really I actually reached out to the expert on the show so that I could bring her on here as well, because I'm so impressed, like you, with
Mm-hmm.
her advocacy and
Mm-hmm.
mission in the world. But I thought to myself, okay, this guy doesn't get it because
Right.
it's everywhere. And I would imagine then a lot of the women listening to this show are dealing with it in their own lives, are maybe working with
Mm-hmm.
people who
Sure.
are affected.
Jenny, I want to say, as women, even though I love the connection that we often always share, there is a little bit of judgment that goes along with moms and their kids, even
Hmm.
in the best
A little
situations,
bit.
right? Well, I want to be respectful here. It depends on who we're talking about, but there's that, spoken or unspoken judgment that a lot of
Yes.
moms feel when it comes to how we parent and our kids. And I can tell you that when my son was, in some of these early grades, people would kind of kindly hint to me, well, maybe you should start tutoring. I'm like, yep, we're doing all that. Maybe you should read to him more. Yep, doing all that. Maybe, so what I think is hard for parents sometimes is, even if you know something is a little bit off with your child, right? Because I do believe moms know,
Yeah.
making the decision to do something about it is opening that public door to some type
Yeah.
of judgment, even if
Yeah.
it's coming from a, well-intentioned place. And a lot of parents, in my experience, are hesitant to do that until it hits the fan, so to speak, and now you have no choice because your child has got a multi-year grade level gap in reading or
Yeah.
spelling or writing, and they're depressed, or they have a generalized anxiety disorder, or they're addicted to a substance, or dropping out of high school. We see everything. So I just want to acknowledge that as women, I think it is really hard. It was really hard for me to decide that I was going to not only embrace, but embody that I am the mother of a neurodivergent individual who has ADHD, dyslexia, and dysgraphia. And we are really proud of the fact that he has that, and that we're going to celebrate his strengths, and we're going to try to remediate his differences because we knew how amazing our son was and still is.
Yeah. That's so important for people to hear. It is the self judgment, the
Hmm.
outside judgment. It's so strong.
It
And it is funny how you say a mom knows, because I knew from preschool
hmm
that his my son's amount of energy, activity,
hmm
just wasn't typical.
Right,
And to hear the boys will be boys. See, like
yeah,
when you were thinking, well, aren't all first graders a little antsy?
right,
That was the message I was receiving from outside, and I was the one saying, "This is not the normal amount of antsy.
right.
He's got more ants in his pants
Yeah,
than he should, and this is not right. Don't you see it? Don't you see it?" And the dismissing
I know.
that,
And
like
Jenny,
what you spoke to a moment ago, of the being shut down
hmm
and silenced, which is such a common theme in all areas of women's history. But to get it when you're trying to advocate for your child's needs, it's paralyzing.
hmm Well, you're making such an important point because, again, I see this all the time where parents know and then they try to do something. And then, unfortunately, even well-intentioned school teams will reassure them that they just need to wait a little bit longer, right? trust the process. We're the educational experts. And I'm not saying that to take away from educational experts, but parents are experts in their children too. And as kids are getting ready to go back to school, this is what happens every school year. Every school district across the country is going to do their baseline assessments. There's different kinds of assessments that they give, but they look at these core areas of like reading, writing, spelling, and math. Parents are going to get those scores. And if their child is below and they try to have a conversation because maybe they're reading and they don't, most districts don't assess spelling nationwide anymore, but reading definitely. Let's
Sure.
just say a parent knows, like since kindergarten, my child has never met the mark and they're now in third grade. And like you're saying, they're like, this isn't normal. Like you were saying about your son, this is not the normal amount of antsy. And they're saying, shouldn't my child who comes to school every day be able to read? Unfortunately, they don't always get the answer that we wish they would get as educational advocates specializing in literacy disabilities, right? They're told, well, just read more at home, or just, we'll work on this. We'll really keep an eye on this child. And what
Mm,
we wish would happen, my team and I, is that those parents or those teachers, whoever is suspecting that there is some type of a learning, I like the word learning difference as opposed to
yeah.
disability going on, that they actually make a formal referral to the school district and get that evaluation so they have the information that they need to either show them that all is well, and your child maybe it just is not, reading is not a high interest topic, but there's nothing to be too concerned about when they're compared to their peers on norm reference standardized assessments, or it's going to highlight, oh, they're only in the 2 percentile and we have a real problem
Mm,
here. Do you know what I
yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
So if your listeners do nothing else, what I want them to know is when they get these assessments is look at them seriously, look at the trend, even though it might be uncomfortable, take the initiative to have a conversation with both the teacher and talk about, if my child's not meeting the mark, what is the process to request a psychoeducational evaluation in this school district? Everything begins, just want to add, Jenny,
Yeah.
everything begins with data, right? A lot of times parents, we come at this emotionally because it's our child, it's our baby.
Yep. Yeah.
And we're very emotional and we believe people should respond to our emotions. But what I found personally, what all of our clients find before they reach us, is school districts will give you the tissue, but they only respond to data that shows that they're required to do something.
So speaking of that requirement, then we encountered a difficult situation with our data.
Mm-hmm.
He cared a lot about school,
Mm-hmm.
doing well.
Mm-hmm.
He has tendencies strong into the rigidity. And so he would get hyper focused on grades.
Mm-hmm.
In fifth grade, we had the school had an app for grades. So he would be checking that daily. I wasn't checking it, but he was. And he ended up getting really good grades in fifth grade. Then in sixth grade, the quintessential slipped through the cracks.
Okay.
That was what happened from fifth to sixth grade. He discovered some social tendencies, and all of a sudden, he went from an all A dashboard to all C's.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I went to the school and said, this is troubling.
Mm-hmm.
He's got all C's when he used to have all A's.
Right.
What's going on? And the problem with that data is that C's are average, Lorraine. That's what they
Oh.
told me. He doesn't need anything. We're not equipped to offer him anything because this is not a problem. He's
Mm-hmm.
average. Maybe last year he was above average. Now he's average. This is okay by us. And I
Right.
said, but if we're looking at the individual, not the global sense of a grading system,
Mm-hmm.
he is an A student who's now getting all C's. Isn't this alarming?
Right.
And when I continued to be dismissed, and he did try to advocate. The school was very big on students advocating for themselves at 11. I
Mm-hmm.
thought that was a little extreme for an 11-year-old boy with documented ADHD to be told to advocate for himself. But anyway,
Right.
I would send him into the teacher with notes to read, to ask questions, because he did not know how to advocate for himself. He didn't know in those pressure situations how to speak up. So I sent him in with note cards to say, Mrs. Teacher, can you please explain to me why I got a C on this math
Mm-hmm.
quiz or
Mm-hmm.
what I did wrong on this paper? And the dismissing continued until finally, before he was switching schools yet again in our town. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember standing outside the school building with a fellow parent,
Mm-hmm.
and I said, he won't be back here next year. He's
Mm-hmm.
not going to that next building. And I think she thought I was being dramatic.
Mm-hmm.
But that summer, I scoured the area for options
Mm-hmm.
and found a little private school, kind of like your son, there were 9 kids in his grade.
Mm-hmm.
Not any options for dates there,
Mm-hmm.
but I said, you need a place where there's 9 kids in
Mm-hmm.
seventh grade,
Jenny,
not 450 or whatever.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious, did your son have an IEP or a 504 plan or
So
anything?
that was another interesting battle that we
Mm-hmm.
dealt with, which was we had done multiple neuropsychs at that point
Mm-hmm.
that all confirmed the same diagnoses.
Right.
And all we could get up to that point was a 504. We were
Mm-hmm.
told that's the extent of our options for him. And at some point, I don't remember when it was, I'd have to look through the paperwork, but I don't feel like doing that because I don't
Right.
want to relive that.
Most
But
parents don't, Jenny. They
yeah,
just send it to us. Yeah.
yeah, and I hopefully, we're kind of past the real
Yes.
dilemmas of it. But at a certain point, maybe it was the third neuropsych that
Mm-hmm.
we finally presented to the school and said, this 504 isn't working. We need to up the ante. And we did get an IEP. It might have been at that point that we had an advocate. It might have been
Yeah.
that we
Right.
were
Mm-hmm.
we were really, got the big guns,
Yes.
but it was just so distressing that it required that much work. And that's what I feel like the women listening who are in the trenches of it
Mm-hmm.
are just so disheartened by the
Yeah.
system.
Right. And often you do need a guide or a collaborator or a mentor to show you the way. And that is what I'm honored to do, for the families we serve. But I do want to say, speaking about your son, if regardless of if your son had a 504 or an IEP, you had protections in place, federal protections in place, that his grades, which are subjective in nature, and both regulations do not rely on those grades as a sole data point for how he should have been supported through the public school system. Like, that's what parents don't know. They don't
Yeah,
know what they don't know. So
you're right.
when they're given these comments by the school team, it's hard to know, well, can I respond to that? What are my rights? Do
Yes.
I have options? Can I require the IEP team actually look at other data points other than his grades? For example, a child who has an IEP, the team's required to address their developmental, functional, and academic needs. And what you were describing were some of your son's functional needs. And the grades were showing a declining trend, right? So again, I'm not saying this for you to feel badly about your decision. It sounds like your son did fine and you found an environment for him to thrive in. But many parents don't have the resources to just pull their child out and put them in a private school.
Yeah, that's
So,
fair.
we do try to put resources out and educate parents on you actually have rights and
Mhm.
why it's so important if your child doesn't have. I tend to prefer an IEP, an individualized educational program, over a 504 plan for a variety of reasons. One is that in most states it requires parent consent and parent involvement, whereas 504 plans do not. But these are different laws for your listeners to know. One is disability law, one is education law, and there's different requirements for eligibility. But if they have those protections in place and they're still not getting their needs met, that is not necessarily your only option is to exit the school district. It's actually to hold them accountable collaboratively and professionally to do what they're obligated to do so your child can receive what's called FAPE, a free and appropriate public education.
Mm. And that is exactly the point that I want to make to the listeners, is not
Yeah,
that you need to go find the nearest private school or charter
right.
school or Catholic school or whatever or homeschool.
Yes. Parents
Yeah,
have options. Yes.
I'm so glad you're out here sharing this information and providing these resources to people, because it is just mind-boggling, the whole thing, when it's an onslaught of emotion and decision making that feels too big for a person. So I'm glad that you are being that guide and kind support system for
Mhm.
parents when they are facing a really hard point in the
Right.
journey.
Yeah, and I want to say there's a lot of misinformation out there. So I I appreciate that parents often don't know what to do. Even, many teachers still subscribe to the myth that you have to wait until 8, right, for some of these skills to come together. And I just heard the other day from one of the families we're working with that the school psychologist told them, we can't identify any type of a disability at the child's like in second grade. That's not true. I mean, that's just a completely inaccurate statement. These
Yeah.
assessments are normed for different ages with different skills that are being assessed. And so there is a lot of misinformation out there. And while we can Google a lot of things, educational advocacy, Jenny, is an unregulated field. So who you get your information from is critically important. And, there's no, like I appreciate when I go to a doctor, are they board certified, right? If
Right.
it's an attorney, they passed the bar. But when you're talking to an
Yeah.
educational advocate, I want to caution your
Yeah.
audience that ask this individual, what is their lived experience? How did they come to know what they know? Do they have any certifications? Because
Yeah.
educational advocacy is a free for all
Yeah.
in
Uh,
most regards.
Guilty in another moment in time, because I did hire an educational advocate, the first one that I used, who, when we were contemplating leaving schools, and I ultimately found that little private school myself,
Mhm.
but she sent us on a wild goose chase of various options in the
Mhm.
area.
Mhm.
And so I dragged my husband to this charter school. Got a
Mhm.
lot of charter schools in the area, and I'm sorry, they're just not all great. So we
Right.
go to this one, and I don't even know how to say this nicely. It felt like touring juvenile detention.
Mhm.
It seemed like a free for all where students were just, now I went to an alternative elementary school, so we were allowed to be in the hallways, and
Mhm.
there was definitely a lot of freedom in that, but this felt like a little this felt like time in the yard, like it
Mhm.
was. And I feel like maybe there were some students smoking, like it really felt like we were at a prison,
Mhm.
and that it was rec time at prison.
Mhm.
We continued the tour. We were polite about it. We kept going on the tour. And then at the end, I remember sitting with the principal and another administrator type. And I asked about college. This was a high school. Maybe it was a 6 through 12. But I remember asking about the college trajectory. He
Mhm.
said, okay, so where do your graduates go from here? And they put their two heads together, whispered a little bit, like, kind of gurgling some words around. And then it was like Eureka. There was that one girl who went to college.
Right.
That's what they said. There was
Yes.
that one girl a couple years ago who went to college. And my husband and I were like, we're out of here.
Right.
Not that every student needs to go to college. I am not a
No,
believer in
I
that
hear you.
philosophy, but when you have to rack your brains
Mhm.
to remember that a few years ago there was a student that graduated and went on to higher education, I found that troubling. So,
And what you're shedding light on, Jenny, is that we know from national statistics that students who have disabilities graduate at much lower levels than anyone. But it kind of makes sense. Like when I think about students who have the specific learning disability of dyslexia, if you have not been taught how to read, to spell, to write, and you don't have any type of plan that
yeah.
informs the accommodations, the assistive technology, or what you need to access a
Mhm,
grade
mhm.
level, college level curriculum, then why would you put yourself in that
No,
environment,
no,
right?
exactly, exactly.
It's like the perfect storm. So,
Yeah.
mhm.
But my part of my point in that story was that I went back to the advocate
Mm,
who sent us to that school, and I
mhm,
said, "What were you thinking? You know
mhm,
my kid.
mhm,
That's not the environment for him. He very well could have been at a charter school, but not that one. Why did you
mhm,
send us there? That was a giant waste of time for us and the people who gave us the tour." And then she came back and said, "Oh, I haven't been there in years, so it must
mhm,
have changed since the last time I visited." And it's to your point, do your research on the advocate, or maybe
mhm.
probe with some deeper questions. I didn't know what I didn't know, so I trusted her. And thankfully I didn't send my kid there. But it was just like, you suggested this, and you're the person that's supposed to know more
Mhm,
about this.
mhm.
thanks. I'm gonna seek additional input.
Yeah, and another caution for your audience is that, there are some great educational advocates out there. So I'm not saying this inclusively of all
Of
advocates, but
course.
each educational advocate has their own bar or their standard for what they think is acceptable, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And for the clients and the kids that we advocate for, we are not looking to lower the bar at all. We're
Mm,
looking to raise the bar as high as their cognitive profile says that it should be raised. And what I
mm,
mean by that is if we know this child is bright and capable, sure, we need services to teach them how to read and to spell, but they should be in honors classes. They should have access to higher level opportunities, and they need their accommodations and their interventions and everything else. And while it sounds so easy to say that, Jenny, that is really hard to get in the public school system because they don't like to put kids with IEPs or accommodations in an honors program, even though it's a bit discriminatory not to, right? And they will tell parents, oh, you don't want them to get this Orton Gillingham reading intervention an hour a day, 5 times a week, because we're going to have to pull them out of core instruction. And then they're going to have to catch up. And we are worried about Sally and Johnny and their emotional state. And again, I can't say it enough for any of the moms and the few dads, hopefully, that are listening to Sideline Sisters, right? Do you let dads
yeah.
listen, Jenny? Yeah.
Right.
But
We're inclusive here. Yeah.
that's great. But I mean, it's so important to know that when you hear these things, they're not all accurate, right? Because if you don't prioritize your child's learning how to read and spell at a very young age, the snowball effect of that gap is just going to become unbearable. Like to your point, by the time they're in middle school or high school, and then there is no college. So
Yeah.
while it is, yes, hard to advocate, have the challenging conversations, and maybe your child does feel a little bit different in the elementary school, they're so much more resilient at that age. We've seen our clients' children actually fully embrace their uniqueness, their dyslexia, their ADHD, their what have you, do
Uh,
little class presentations on it to educate others. I mean,
mm,
again, I want to keep beating this drum that
yeah.
waiting is never the answer, and getting accurate data and not relying on what others tell you, whether it be a parent or a well-intentioned teacher or administrator or even a pediatrician.
Yep.
Pediatricians are honest to say they know very little about dyslexia.
Yes. Yeah.
It's not part of their medical training. So just don't rely on what people tell you. Feel confident and comfortable knowing that you have a right as a parent of a child in a public school system to ask for this data to make informed decisions about their education and their life, because the two are very closely related.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Listen to that wise advice. Pardon the interruption, but I have to tell you about my absolute favorite place on planet Earth. It's called Canyon Ranch. Have you ever heard of it? It is a wellness resort, and there are several locations in the United States. I have been to the one in the Berkshires of Massachusetts, and I'm telling you about it so that you can enjoy 10% off this spectacular place. Everything from the food, the staff, the facilities, the workshops, the exercise classes, the overall vibe, it's first class. So I hope you will check it out. You can book online or over the phone using code SIDELINE to save 10%. And now let's get back to the show. Now, I'm curious, Lorraine. I would imagine that this work is all consuming. You're dealing with children, children who might in some way reflect back your own experience.
Mm-hmm.
And these are families, these are
Yeah.
humans.
Yes.
And I would think that it's hard to separate, hard to go into Lorraine's personal life without bringing Lorraine's professional life and vice versa.
Yeah.
But how do you deal with having such an emotionally charged job
Mm-hmm.
and also a life outside of the office?
That's such a good question. And I will tell you, we're like starting our 10th year in business, and I feel like I'm just starting to figure this out, Jenny, because I am so passionate about this work, and I feel I feel the heartache of the families that we work with. And so I willingly accept the responsibility of helping them and their children, right? And they almost become like my team and I say, these are like our kids too, literally.
Yeah, yeah.
And we love getting the emails when, they're thriving years later, but in the moment, it is really hard not to if you're any type of an empathic person at all, it's really hard not to feel that pain when parents are sharing their fears, their doubts, their frustrations. But two things I want to say. One thing that I learned professionally is that yes, we can all cry behind the scenes. Let's get it out, right? Let's process because it is terribly sad and frustrating and it makes you angry. But sharing with parents that that's not going to lead to a productive result for your child has really helped so many families understand, that we have to advocate without emotions, right, in front of the school district.
That's where I failed.
Yeah, and many, myself too, right? We get there I think you take the long road sometimes when you figure these things out. But to answer your question, what it really came down for me was boundaries. And I'm still working to put these in place because my team, my husband, my son will tell you, I would work 11 hours a day. I'd work, during the day, after dinner. I'd work on the weekends because I'm so passionate about the work that it didn't feel like work for me. It felt like, what I want to do in every, waking minute. At the same time, it was kind of having a real impact on me personally, mentally, and physically. I'm, as I told you, closer to 60 than 50. My body was like, you can't sit in a car or sit at a desk all day long. And mentally, I was running on high cortisol, like, 11, 12 hours a day. And then my stomach would start to have issues. So I have worked over the years on my mindset, on my preserving my energy, establishing boundaries, trying to, eat a clean diet so that my system is strong. And, to me, this work is not for the faint at heart. I've had other gurus in the field say, I don't know how you do what you do. When I leave those meetings, I just want to go eat and drink or drive off a bridge or all these things. And it's true. This work is not easy, but it is truly, Jenny, the most meaningful work I've ever done. And I say that for two reasons. One is when parents tell me, like, you trained me well and I knew what to do and I did this or I helped a friend or, I just feel like the ripple effect of what my team and I are doing, you can't not receive all that goodness, right? It's amazing. And the other part of it is, like I said, it's still healing me. I still have the guilt and the doubt from my own son's school experience. And I wish I didn't, but the hard truth is I do. And he would even say things at times. He'd say, because it's funny, the PTA logo used to be one voice, every child. I hope I'm getting that right. It's been a while since I was advocating through the PTA, but one voice, every child. And I love the PTA because people think it's all bake sales and getting funds for recess equipment and what have you. But actually, the PTA is the largest and oldest child advocacy organization out there. So, fun fact for your audience. But my son would say to me, Mom, you're advocating for every child and not your own child. And that really hit hard. He would let me know, like, you're burning the candle at both ends for everybody, but you're not like here for me sometimes. And of course I'd be like, well, Jonathan, the work I do, look at the ripple effect, you're helping thousands of kids, what have you. But I still have guilt. Like, I wish I knew what I know now when he was in second, third, fourth grade. I wish I would have explored different options for him. Again, my son is well adjusted. He's happy. He's on his own path as an entrepreneur. But I just want to be like, your sideline sister says real women, real shit. And I want to say, I still have that guilt. He's turning 21 and I still have to process that. So I want parents to know, like, I really get this. Like, I understand how it creates these holes in your heart, but it's never too late. And so if you have a parent listening and they're like, oh my God, I wish, I would have done this. My child's in high school. Like, don't ever lose hope for your neurodivergent child because it's never too late. And there's always options.
Thank you for speaking to the guilt that we feel when we are making these enormous decisions that we can only make with the information that we have in that given moment. And it is very real to years later have regrets, have doubts that we made the right choice then. And especially when you have a child that voices that to you, as mine does to me.
Right.
And I pray for the day when it's all been made peace about. That was so grammatically incorrect, but when it's all been, I don't want to say washed away, but accepted
Mm-hmm.
and given the grace that it deserves,
Mm-hmm.
because we made choices for our son that he will present opposition to now, and
Sure.
you shouldn't
Yeah.
have done that, and
Right.
or it'll be tongue in cheek because close to yours, mine's 20,
Yes.
and he'll reflect and say, well, you did that. If you hadn't done that, or I never want to do that again because it reminds me
Sure.
of that experience that I won't explain here because it's his story, not mine. But it is like a dagger to the heart of,
Mhm.
why did I do that? Why did I think that was the best choice?
Right.
Well, I did what I did with the
Yeah,
information I had.
exactly. And I think, the one thing that I believe, as you said, this is my son's story too, but I believe there was never a moment that he didn't feel loved or supported or know that his parents were doing everything in their power to help him. And I think that your son probably felt the same way, whether he agreed with the decisions you were
Mhm.
making, as parents until our children turn 21, it's our job to keep them safe and to do whatever we believe is in their best interest. So I think we have to give ourselves grace. And I think the parents listening who maybe are seeing that their child can't do what they want them to do in the area of school or reading or writing or spelling, you know, just acknowledge, meet them where they are, acknowledge where they are, and look at your options at that point in time. And if you are intimidated to go through that process on your own, know that there are people like me across the country who can be a resource and help for you. You do not have to go this alone. In fact, the most popular package we sell, Jenny, is called Don't Go It Alone. And I named all of my services are named from my lived experience. So when I used to do like my, what people in the industry call like a discovery call, right? When you're just trying to
Yeah,
meet with somebody,
yeah.
I always call that what keeps you up at night. It was the what keeps you
Mm,
up at night call because I know that for moms who see that their child is not meeting the mark in whatever way they want them to meet that mark, those moms are working behind the scenes, after hours, on the computer, looking on YouTube, Googling. They are trying to figure out, they're not sleeping. They're either
right.
getting up early or doing this at night. They are trying to figure out what does their child need. And
That's
so
it.
then from that, we were like, oh, we got to have a don't go it alone package, right?
Yeah.
So, and I mean, it's kind of tongue in cheek, but it's all born out of my own experience. Because as you said, this is not easy. This is not easy.
That's so good. The what keeps you up at night. And truly, that's what I end up hearing from
Mhm.
people is I was up all night Googling
Right.
the best book to read on such and such, or what's the best diet, or what's the best clothing for my sensory focused kid, or
Right. Exactly.
what device, what tactile things, what
Hmm.
games, what
Yeah.
are the best everything. And that is what keeps moms up, is
Yeah.
always wanting to do the best, but having no freaking clue what it is.
Exactly. And it's hard. But again, I am positive by nature and it is never too late to help your child. And so rather than spinning in multiple directions and relying on, references online or what have you, there is a system in place. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act is the federal law that oversees 14 different classifications of disabilities. And these kids have rights once they meet that criteria. So and as you said, there's 504 plans that allow for accommodations for kids who are one of their major life activities is affected and they need, accommodations because they're substantially restricted in that area. So it doesn't have to feel so done on your own or this eclectic approach of talking to your neighbor and people in the parking lot and online. I mean, there are resources.
Yep.
There is help out there. Yes.
Yes. Oh God, that's relatable. We all
Yeah.
we all know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I
We
reference that
do.
all the time, that polling, 75 people in the neighborhood, carry a clipboard through the mall, like just to get your basic idea of how much sleep do I need. So you have said a couple of times in our conversation that you are naturally predisposed to positivity.
Hmm.
And that is admirable. I'm
Hmm.
sure there are people listening who are jealous. And I hear that. I know that we all have kind of a resting state, one way or the other. However, you can be a very positive young person, but then you get older and you start to see the ways of the world and confront challenges that didn't appear when you were younger. What do you do to maintain a positive attitude? Does it just come naturally, or are there things you do to perpetuate it?
hmm Again, another great question. I would say that my natural disposition is to be I'm more of a glass half full than a glass
Sure.
half empty kind of a person. But it's also a learned experience because I think, like we were talking about earlier, early on in my family's story, and I would say in other areas of my life when I was, in school, college, career, I started to realize that I could either like react emotionally to stuff that was happening to me, or I could choose how, like, I had some agency over this and I could choose how I wanted to respond. And in this whole situation with my son in the school, I tried the whole angry approach and the injustice of it all and why isn't someone doing something. And I think people were like, oh, who's this helicopter mom, she has a lot to say about this. And I kind of got labeled as like as I said, the woman with the D, the scarlet D. So I could see that that wasn't really working. I think that it's really just realizing that we, in that moment, are we trying to be part of the problem, are we trying to be part of the solution? Like, what is our end goal? That's really where my positivity comes from. And I would say, even when I go to some of these really contentious school meetings with families, just taking a moment to realize and recognize that a lot of these people have good intentions, but they're victims of the system that we've been talking about, right? Public education. And as you shared with me as a teacher, you didn't always feel comfortable saying what was on your mind. So understanding that, the system is not set up for a lot of open communication, transparent communication. Everybody's protecting their job or being cautious about what they say. But at the end of the day, there still is a federal law, there's a process, there's criteria, there's things that must be considered. And so I'm sharing that again because that's what gave me hope. That's what allowed me to stay positive for my son and with others, is not getting into the muck of it all, not blaming and shaming the school district or the school team, because that, first of all, it's not productive and it really didn't feel good, Jenny. I didn't want to be the person who was criticizing my son's teachers, or I actually won't work with clients who go on social media and put down their school district or their school staff, because a lot of people are guiltless. I mean, definitely there's a lot of people who are making curriculum decisions that I wish would choose a different curriculum because it's not impactful and it's leading to, a country where we have significant literacy issues. But I think when you recognize that everybody's showing up with their own unique perspective, right? It's not all personal to you or your child. And how can I, with that understanding, still get the outcome that I want without it taking like such a heavy toll on me? Then you are kind of able to maintain a more, I don't want to call it neutral, I'm going to call it more hopeful outlook,
Mm,
right?
yeah, that's so good. Well, this has been enormously helpful and encouraging to the parents listening who are in it right
Mhm.
now and often consumed with the hopeless, helpless emotions. So I'm
Yep.
hoping that they have a renewed spirit now.
I
So
hope so too. I hope so
yeah,
too. Yeah. Mhm.
of course you do. That you're positive.
Yeah.
So can you please tell the audience how they can work with you and what kinds of resources you offer?
Sure, I would love to. So our website is simply lorrainehightower.com, and you can put the spelling of my name obviously in your show notes. But I have a team of, I have teachers on my team. I have all of certified dyslexia advocates on my team. And we really support families in two ways. We offer done for you advocacy services that are very comprehensive in nature, kind of like I was talking about, that don't go it alone
Mm,
package, which
yeah.
gives parents a lot of relief because they've often been carrying the burden and not knowing what to say and kind of trying to go toe to toe with school districts. So we offer that high level done for you comprehensive advocacy work where we are working collaboratively with parents, but really taking the lead to get the results that the parents want. Oh, yeah, you had a question. Yeah.
Yes. And is that specific to dyslexia or that's
Hmm.
any kind of diagnosis?
So we specialize in serving students who have dyslexia in the public school system. I will say the majority of our students also have a co-occurring disability. So, unfortunately, a lot of these kids will have a generalized anxiety disorder, even though they're in elementary school. Many start off with speech issues before we identify that it's dyslexia. ADHD, and probably 35–40% of our families, their children have that as well. And so there are co-occurring conditions that go along, but I'm often asked by parents who might have a child with, that's medically fragile. I heard you were an amazing advocate. Would you take our case, kind of thing? And so that's really not the family. Obviously, I want to help. My heart wants to help, but I want them to work with an educational advocate who is specialized in medically fragile children. And I don't believe I would be the best match for them. So we try to guide them to an appropriate advocate. When it comes to dyslexia, I think we're, at the top of the game. So I would highly encourage folks to reach out to us, because the second way we help is not just doing the advocacy with the parents, but it's resources and parent training and just being that place where if something happens in your meeting, you have a place to turn and go, what would these folks say about that? Is this real? Can I do this? I'd like a sample of a letter, or I need a template to walk me through this. What should I be considering at this stage? So we really are trying to do for parents that need it done, and then educate and encourage others that are doing it on their own that you're not crazy, first of all, that what you're seeing is real for your child. And we do a lot of clarifying and validating parent concerns, and we do that through parent consultations. Again, not to confuse your listeners, we have the done for you, we have the educational, and then the most common, the way that everybody starts off with us is through a paid parent consultation where they can submit up to 3 significant pieces of data. So it could be a school evaluation, private evaluation, could be work samples, it can be an IEP if their child has an IEP or a 504, whatever they want. And then I personally meet with them online for an hour. I tell them everything that I'm seeing, why I'm either concerned about it or not concerned about it. And we really do outline an advocacy roadmap for those parents. So they actually leave with tactical, practical action steps that they can take if they're going to try to do that on their own. So that's been really helpful for a lot of families. And we just started doing that about 2 years ago. And that was born out of parents saying, hey, could you just look at my child's stuff and give me your professional
Yeah.
opinion? Because there are points in the school year, Jenny, where we don't have the capacity to just take on, every family. But that's pretty much how we serve. And then, I love to do podcasts and webinars, and I am still beating the drum about dyslexia. And, as I shared with you, I think offline, this to me is a national crisis. The 2024 scores that came out by the National Assessment of Educational Process, which is often referred to as NAEP, found that only 31% of grade 4 students are at the proficient reading level. And these are not dyslexic kids, this is all readers, right? And that 60% were at basic. But,
Mm.
this is just unheard of in a country as affluent and well educated as the United States, right?
Yeah.
So I try to do a lot to shine a light on a problem that I believe needs national attention, and to get people talking about how it's not a shameful thing if your child has dyslexia. I kind of want to wrap up with some positive points about, it's estimated that we've had as many as 11 presidents have dyslexia. There's endless actors, lawyers, surgeons, novelists, it's just, there's no limit on the field that people can go into if they have dyslexia or other neurodiversities. And yet, as a country, we don't embrace this population. We put them down, we make them feel ashamed, they hide, they have anxiety. And so, whatever I can do to recognize not just the parents of these kids, because a lot of this is highly inheritable. So the parents are dealing with some of this too. But, celebrate these kids, because I see them and I see their gifts, and I see them as the world changers. Steve Jobs was dyslexic, Bill Gates thought to be dyslexic. Like, our world
Mm.
changers have neurodiversities. So I just, whatever I can do to support that effort and hopefully change the mindset of a lot of people, and like the individual that you spoke about, and thank you for reaching out to that organization to let them know that neurodiversity is real and very common, and it
Yeah.
should be celebrated, in my opinion.
So what remind me again, if I know you, I think you said it, but
Yeah.
what percentage of people are dyslexic again?
So the Yale Center on Dyslexia and Creativity, Sally Shaywitz is one of the top gurus and personal mentor for me in this field. They have determined that it's as much as 1 in 5 or up to 20% of the population. Now, depending upon where you look, you'll see kind of different statistics. I've seen things, 10 to 20%. And I want to say the reason for that is because dyslexia, like any other disability, occurs on a continuum. So it could be mild, moderate,
Yeah.
severe.
Yeah.
So like you have to kind of identify as dyslexic to be counted amongst some of these statistical studies, but we know it's higher. It's closer to 20%. And a lot of, like my husband, part of what we found out in this process with our son is that my husband has ADHD and dyslexia, but he never was appropriately identified. He did not learn how to read until he was in the fourth grade, and he just thought he was stupid, quite honestly. So, a lot of people don't get identified. And so, of the folks that do,
Yeah.
that's a pretty large portion of our population. As I said earlier, it's
Yeah.
2 to 4 kids in every classroom.
Yeah.
And again, I want to just give a shout out to teachers because I have teachers on my team, and I think that is the hardest, most one of the most unappreciated jobs out there. It's not easy, and we put so much on our teachers. So I am committed to also continuing to advocate for teachers getting the training that they need to be reading specialists, the training that they need to teach reading based on the science of reading, and understanding that it is not their fault because teachers carry a lot of guilt when they can't teach a child how to read and spell too, and they don't know that it's because they're using an inappropriate methodology because that kid has dyslexia. So I just want to acknowledge the teaching population. I'm so grateful for what they do, and it concerns me how much we expect of our teachers and we keep piling on and piling on. And but at the same time, my heart is with the kids and their parents because we've got to help them, and they deserve to have their educational needs met.
Amen.
Amen. Yes.
And honestly, that's why I left the teaching profession, because it is so, so hard to do
Mhm.
that job well.
It is.
And I mean, it's not as hard to do it poorly.
Mhm.
It's not hard to show up at 8 in the morning or 7:30
Mhm.
and leave at 3:30. That's not bad.
Right.
So it's not hard to do. It's not hard to do any job badly. So, but I didn't want to do it badly.
Right.
I didn't want to do it adequately. I wanted
Well,
to do it well, and I knew I couldn't with a baby.
yeah, and I will share Melissa Minnick, who's on my
Yeah.
team. She's been with me for 5 years. I adore Melissa, and she was a teacher for 20 years in various districts. Part of why she was drawn to this mission and to this work is because she had her own guilt, like you're talking about, Jenny. Like she was a teacher that Harvard actually came and filmed her teaching. I think it was science or something because she was such a gifted teacher. And
Wow.
yet she left the profession because administrators were putting her in places asking her to teach reading, and she would tell them, "I can't teach reading. Like I'm not successful at this." But she didn't know why she wasn't successful all these years ago. So anyway, it's a unique situation no matter how you look at it, whether you're a parent or an administrator or
Yeah.
a teacher, what have you. It's kind of all encompassing. So again, I love being here, and I do want to say that as a gift to you and what you do to your audience, if anybody does want to sign up, it's just our discovery call. We call it a discovery call. I dropped the what keeps you up at night because it was too long, according
But
to
I do
me.
love that.
I know, me too. But if you want to go to lorrainehightower.com, you can sign up for a complimentary discovery call. And if you do mention Sideline Sisters in scheduling that discovery call, you will get a significant discount of over $100 off of our paid consultation with me, which is at least an hour of an online Zoom meeting talking about your child's specific data that you submitted, my personal recommendations, and giving you a roadmap on how to move forward. And we want to do that as just because we admire what you're doing, Jenny. So we're happy to extend that offer.
Thank you, Lorraine. That's huge. Again, if I were to turn the clocks back and know about you, even not that my child was ever diagnosed with dyslexia, who knows? Maybe that's on the list, but it just didn't come up as far as I know. It just would have felt really good to have someone with your pedigree and personal investment
Mhm.
take a look at things and perhaps point us in a different direction. So, for anyone listening who's got a kid going through something
Yeah.
academically, please check out Lorraine's website and take her up on this unbelievable offer.
Yeah, and I just want to add on that, it's okay if you don't know that they have dyslexia, because like to your point, the probably half the families that we work with have no idea what's going on with their child. So that's why the consultation can be super helpful, because even though we specialize in dyslexia, my, bandwidth on knowing how to help point parents in the right direction based on different disabilities, we can still give you resources for that. We just don't serve
Yeah.
that ourselves. Yeah.
Thank you. And to that point, when my son was really little, like 3,
Mm-hmm.
my antenna went
Mm-hmm.
up,
Yep.
and it was because I kept hearing from his preschool teacher, no, stop, don't. No, stop,
Mm-hmm.
don't. And I said to myself, I don't think he should be hearing this as often as he is.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on with him that
Mm-hmm.
everything he's choosing to do is resulting in no, stop, or don't?
Right.
And he proceeded to go on to a different preschool that adored him, well meaning, but
Yes.
tried to talk me out of pursuing testing
Right.
and going down that rabbit hole, because they loved him as a little human and
Sure.
said, no, he's fine, he's
Yeah.
just very spirited.
Right.
And I said, but then you shouldn't be sending him to the principal. He shouldn't be
That's right.
at
Being
4 and 5
disciplined. Yeah, he's being
5
disciplined
years
for,
old.
yeah.
If he's just energetic, it
Hmm.
wouldn't be resulting in the repercussions you're presenting. So I'm hearing mixed messages and need to do some further investigation.
Yeah. And as your son heard, don't, or what was it? No, stop,
No,
don't.
stop, don't. Yep.
Kids with dyslexia here, you're just not trying hard enough. If you
Mm,
just tried harder, if you just
yes.
practiced your reading, if you just, studied
Yes.
more. And so it doesn't matter what the neurodiversity is, that's not the answer. Trying
No.
harder is not the answer, or barking, corrective phrases at these kids is not the answer. Getting the data and then putting the strategies, intervention, accommodations in place to help them thrive is what it's going to take.
So, parents who are listening who are currently expressing these kinds of words to your child,
Mm-hmm.
you're not wrong. You're
Right.
not bad.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know what you don't know. So, if
Exactly.
you are prone to saying you're not trying hard enough, do better, no,
Right.
stop, don't, just take a beat
Yeah.
and contact Lorraine.
Yeah. And I can't tell you how many times I had to apologize to my son, Jenny. I
Yes,
would say,
yes.
hey, I'm sorry I made you work with that tutor 4 days a week that summer and you couldn't go to the pool and do all these fun things. I thought that was in your best interest. But
Yep.
like you're saying, you're listening to this podcast now, you're hearing Jenny and I say you can just pivot in this moment in time and take a different course of action, and your whole family will be more peaceful for it, right? Yeah.
Yes. Oh, Lorraine, this has been such a delight. I'm so
Oh,
grateful to you. The road that you've traveled that led you to this work is so powerful. And I'm just so thankful that you shared that story today.
well, it's my honor to be with you. And thank you for all of the important work you do and everyone that you feature. As women, we really do need authentic conversations about real stuff that we're all dealing
Yeah.
with.
Yeah. So, on that note, I want to invite you to raise a glass
Oh, absolutely.
and let us say cheers to never give up. It's never too late to help our kids. It's
Right.
never too late.
Absolutely. Yes. Cheers. Thank you,
Cheers.
Jenny.
Thank you, Lorraine. I wish you all the success with your continued efforts and everything that you choose to do.
Thank you so much. And to you as well.
I know this has been a really long episode, and I appreciate you staying till the end because I will now share Lorraine's notes from the sidelines. So, just to summarize everything. Number 1, moms know deep down when something needs changing. It's a mother's intuition. Number 2, you could do everything right and still have a child with needs. It's not about fault or blame, it just is. Number 3, the special ed process is lengthy and often met with challenge and condescension. But please keep in mind, it's not always that the teachers or administrators don't want to help. There might be sometimes when that's true, but very often it's that they don't have the proper training to approach this situation. Number 4, 2 to 4 kids in every classroom have dyslexia. Literacy is a national crisis. Number 5, anytime something traumatic or big happens, we go through the stages of grief, which are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. But Lorraine moved on to what she calls the 6th stage of grief, which is advocacy. The desire to help others avoid your pain. And it really can heal your heart. Number 6, when you get school baseline assessment results, take the initiative to have a conversation with the school about it, because everything begins with data. Number 7, educational advocacy is unregulated, so do your homework to find the advocate who's right for you. Number 8, waiting is never the answer. So if a school is telling you to just give it time and let's see where things shake out, no. Go back to number 1, which was mother's intuition. Number 9, get emotional behind the scenes, but it's important to advocate without emotion. And number 10, we do what we believe is in our kids' best interest. So if things haven't gone right, or if you've gotten a diagnosis that hurts your heart, give yourself grace, give your family grace, and then move forward. Thank you so much to Lorraine Hightower and for all of you for sticking with this episode until now. Please share this episode with your friends and neighbors. As Lorraine mentioned, dyslexia and neurodiversity are so common, so I guarantee you know people who could benefit from hearing Lorraine's message. And please check the show notes for all the important links, including vegan lifestyle coaching. Be sure to tune in again next week as I start an amazing series of episodes focused on fashion, image, style. And it's not just a bunch of how to dress your body stuff. It's the deep, relatable stories these women share that got them into their work in fashion. So have an amazing week and cheers to you.